Cannabis sativa has been around for 28 million years, and we have probably been using it since before we were humans. So it's about as organic as it can get. Even though it's still outlawed in most places, its gradual legalization and general acceptance makes it seem kind of like a whole new drug. We're just beginning to understand what it does for us, and there's a lot of excitement around it. But what gets lost in the celebration is that cannabis is not for everyone. There are people who tried it once or twice and knew it wasn't for them. Some experienced a 3-day hangover. Others got extremely anxious, even paranoid. We don't have to worry about those people. They abstain all by themselves. But what about those of us who do smoke, who enjoy the high, who enjoy socializing, who use it for medicinal purposes? What do we need to know to keep smoking and not compromise our health or our mental abilities? Studies have shown that marijuana used in adolescence can be a contributing factor in triggering or worsening the symptoms of serious psychotic mental illnesses, most notably schizophrenia. Studies also found that young people with a predisposition for developing a psychotic illness may be drawn to pot at an earlier age, possibly as a form of self-medication. That's where the science is not absolute in deciding which comes first. But the simple explanation is, if you've experienced hallucinations or suffered delusions or other psychotic-like experiences from smoking weed, it's an indication that you may have a predisposition to some kind of psychotic illness, in which case, take caution to avoid substances altogether and talk to someone you can trust, even help you learn more about yourself and your condition. How old should you be to smoke marijuana? Well, here's the dilemma. Although today people of all ages smoke, about 30% of us are between 16 and 25. But have you ever wondered why car rental companies require you to be 25 years old to rent a car? Brain scans have clearly shown that the prefrontal cortex, which helps you inhibit your impulses and plan and organize your behavior to reach a goal, is not fully developed until you reach the age of 25. Also, the brain's reward system becomes highly active around the time of puberty and gradually subsides by the age of 25. For men, that is. For women, it's 23. This means adolescents and young adults are more ready to engage in risky behavior and seek peer group approval. This desire for this kind of reward is at its highest, and you feel the greatest reward when you are accepted by your friends, more than any other time in your life, before or after. Also, there's growing evidence that the younger you are when you start smoking and the intensity with which you smoke is going to drop your IQ by as much as 8 points. So think about it. You might start with an IQ of 120, but by the time you're 22, your IQ would have dropped by 8 points. If you stop smoking at 22, those IQs will not come back. So think about that when you smoke, because having a few tokes once or twice a week is not going to limit you, but heavy smoking will. What is heavy smoking? 1 or 2 joints a day or almost every day. Personally, I've been a moderate smoker for about 50 years, but I can tell when somebody smokes too often, especially as they get into their 40s, 50s, 60s. The words and ideas slow down, and trying to make a point starts to suffer. It also might matter how much brain work you do, but I couldn't smoke at night and perform satisfactorily in my job the next day. So for most of my years smoking, it was moderate. Mainly on Friday night or socially, but never on a weeknight when I had work the next day. In other words, treat marijuana like alcohol, sparingly. Use it for fun, but not for everything. Can you overdose? First, let's be clear. According to the CDC, a fatal marijuana overdose is so unlikely we have no record or knowledge of it. It's not like heroin or cocaine in that no one has ever died from too much THC. An overdose on marijuana is impossible in the traditional sense, says Jason Levine, PhD, a psychologist, and addiction treatment expert, but high doses will debilitate you. I read about a 52-year-old man who was injecting THC to stimulate his appetite as he underwent brain tumors treatment. He experienced restlessness and speech problems and confusion for 2 days before seeking emergency care. It turns out that he had injected about 330 milligrams of THC. That's like 30 times a typical dose when you get high. He didn't die, but it was an unwelcomed high. Which takes us to cannabis abuse. I once accompanied a friend to a Narconon meeting. Everyone who spoke started by stating their drug of choice. When I heard one man name marijuana, I had to stifle a laugh. But as he described his addiction, I realized it was real. He talked about how it was the first thing he did in the morning and continued to do so all day long. He would even wake up in the middle of the night to get high. He spent $500 a week feeding this habit. Approximately 1 in 10 people who use marijuana will become addicted. When you start before age 18, the rate of addiction rises to 1 in 6. Moderate smoking is perhaps 4 to 6 times a month, but if you smoke 1 or 2 joints a day, it's considered heavy use. Now, marijuana has been called a gateway drug, but most people who smoke never go on to stronger stuff. It comes down to your environment and the company you keep. If you're surrounded by people who use stronger drugs and the attitude is of acceptance, you will be more likely to move on to harder drugs. One of the things that marijuana does to the brain, THC affects the andameta. Ananda means internal bliss or happiness in Greek. We call it AED for short. AED is produced in the brain and regulates inflammation, pain, appetite, mood, and pre- and postnatal development. It affects the reinforcement and reward processes of the brain. It also modulates the reward responses induced by cannabinoids, as well as other drugs. Repeated heavy use of THC eventually replaces the naturally produced AED and makes you even more dependent on smoking THC to modulate your moods, anxiety, appetite, pain. Going off cannabinoids will allow your brain to eventually start making AED again. You should be back to normal within a few months. How do you know if you're abusing THC? Some people have curbed their alcohol dependency by switching to weed, which doesn't quite seem like the right approach. Because if you're lighting up in the morning, in the afternoon and night, and before bed, you have merely switched drugs, and you still have an addiction. This may be mild compared to your behavior on alcohol, but eventually you'll have to deal with the need to smoke more and stronger cannabis to get and sustain a high, anxiety when you're not high, choosing to smoke over other activities, sleeplessness, mood swings, heart palpitations, lung infections or breathing problems, panic attacks, and worsening symptoms in those with schizophrenia or pre-schizophrenia. Many older and long-time users or people with breathing or liver issues have turned to tinctures because they are easier on your body. I will explore tinctures in my next podcast, so stay tuned. The one thing that I learned about my study of psilocybin was to respect the plant. I think it's the way you should approach any drug. Respect the drug, and you will in turn respect your body and respect your mind. I mean, overindulgence is nothing new. Aristotle quotes a guy named Chilo, Chilo, for saying nothing in excess. Later, I think it was Oscar Wilde said everything in moderation, which has a little different meaning. But it means that people have been excessing for a long, long time, and the need to curb that excess has been around equally as much time. So if you're going to smoke, keep it light. Treat a joint like 2 or 3 glasses of wine, and keep those IQs at their present level. Spare your lungs and smoke medicinally or for fun, not to fill the time in between. Thank you for listening to Nana on Marijuana. Please be kind and like or resend this episode to your friends and family.